Welcome back to Danny Rants. Today we have a long-awaited guest, highly asked for and requested, one that personally I cannot wait for. Guys, across from me, I have one of the biggest musical icons in Melbourne's music history, especially dance music, a DJ, event promoter, festival promoter, you name it, the list is this long. Mr. Mark James, how are you?
Good, mate. Glad to be here. Thank you.
I'm so glad to have you across from me. So
it's been a while.
We've been working to get this to happen for about 6 months, and finally,
it's great.
a couple of sicknesses and things like that, but
I know, right?
here we are. Mark, let's take it all the way back, right? For people that don't know who Mark James is, anyone sort of in our generation will, can you explain to me who Mark James is?
DJ, producer, promoter, founder of Future Entertainment. We did Future Music Festival, Summadayze, all the Docks Party events, various other brands and international brands, and music producer as well.
So we'll dive into it, right? Like, we're not going to go all the way back because you are such a plethora of knowledge of when it comes to nightclub and events and dance music history. You sort of start in the 80s as a promoter, is that right?
Yeah, early 80s, yeah.
And how does that start and what inspires you to start?
Well, I left Melbourne when I was 21, basically. I lost my licence in a GT Falcon. So straight up to Queensland to where my brother lives. So started working in clubs up there. That's when I first started DJing, and sort of just went from clubs to running little parties and ended up on the Gold Coast for about 8 years, I think it was, working at Penthouse and Twain's, nightclubs down there and running events, and then finally moved back to Melbourne about 1989, I think it was, and then started working at Chase's DJing and started up small events, which ended up getting larger and larger over time.
So you're a DJ first in the beginning.
Always a DJ, yeah.
Yeah, still
always.
are a DJ, obviously.
Still are a DJ, yeah.
So what got you into dance music in the first place?
Oh, geez, when I started DJing, it was early Italo days and funk, and wouldn't say funk, but, I probably my family, my brother used to come home with lots of records in the old days. And, going right back, I used to run a dance thing at school hall at Sunshine Tech. So it was 5 cents to get in at lunchtime. And, and that ended up booking AC/DC for $3,000 for a school social.
Did you?
So, yeah. Yeah, it was a long time ago. You can look it up on the bio of Sunshine Tech if you like. And it was sort of always there, the DJing and the promoting, I guess, a bit of the curse.
That's crazy. AC/DC at Sunshine Tech.
Yeah. They pulled up an E.H. Holden with drums sticking out the back and guitar thing. It was just before they were releasing their first album. So, it was a school social. Angus was up on the amps dancing around as he does.
That's you've got probably one of the biggest lists of artists that anyone has probably in Australia worked for.
That's the biggest act I ever did when I was like 15.
So you're originally DJ, not dance music, but at what point does dance sort of start to take over your life?
It sort of started, I was DJing sort of Italo stuff in the early 80s, and then it sort of went to new wave, all the, Depeche Mode and all those sort of bands, and then sort of switched to hip hop. All of a sudden, hip hop came in. Like Jungle Brothers and what are they called? Anyway, we have to cut that bit out.
Right.
Public Enemy, Public Enemy, and all that. So I started to really get into hip hop, and so it was in the DMC. Used to judge all the DMC DJ competitions and all that. So it was always there. It wasn't. I was always just a DJ. Thrown in because when I first started, there wasn't really DJs. There wasn't no direct drive turntables, all belt driven. So you had to learn to mix yourself, and you do remixes with double tape decks and all that sort of stuff. So it was at the very beginning, I guess.
You come back to Melbourne, and some of the clubs that you've been involved in are arguably some of the most iconic nightclubs to ever be in Melbourne. What's the first sort of club gig that you get into as a promoter?
Well, I started when I first got back here. I was working Chase's Friday and Saturday night, and pretty much running Express on the Friday night with Grant Harrison, which was like a legendary night. And I was sort of getting very techno, and I think I got sacked about 4 or 5 times from Chases. George always got me back for someone, you're playing your music's too weird and all that sort of stuff. So, but he'd always get me back. But then basically I sort of ended up getting a jack of it because I wanted to play what I wanted to play, and started a club at the back of the Palace called Pure, which was like probably one of the first techno nights. You know, we brought out Carl and Sasha and all, Groove Rider and all those DJs. And that sort of was the beginning of bringing out all the internationals. And then Pure was at the back of the Palace, and then it sort of, at times it got that big we had to open it up into the main room of the Palace where, you know, it was a sort of it was like a no-no to do dance music at the Palace. It was like a rock venue, but ended up sort of, being actually the main part of the Palace.
A lot of people credit that night, Pure, as sort of the beginning of that wave of those massive DJs, like you said, Carl and Digweed and John and et cetera. When you said you bought them out, like how were you bringing them out back then?
Oh, geez. A lot of DJs, you just bring them out they'd come out, they'd cost about $1,500 and they'd stay at your place or, stay at a motel down the road. It was all, just on a wing and a prayer in those days. Yeah.
How'd you get in contact with them?
Fax machine.
Really?
Yeah. But I used to go overseas quite a bit as well. So, throughout the years, I always went to the Miami music festivals and, all those sort of things. So you sort of get contacts and, it was just through, I don't know how, to be honest. In those days, there was no mobile phones, Well,
not even really probably emails back in the early 90s.
No, there wasn't. It was all fax machines.
And so you were getting all this sort of music coming in from all over the world, from Chicago, London, Berlin, and in Melbourne especially, it blew right up.
Yeah, it did, yeah.
How and why do you think that was coming into Melbourne in the early 90s, and why was it getting so big?
I think because we, when we took over the Docklands and started doing big parties at the docks, we became probably one of the only places that were doing, those sort of numbers really, and in underground dance or that sort of respect. You had your big day outs and stuff like that, but we were sort of, and going till 7 a.m. in the morning and then Summadayze was like the first, in those days they weren't called raves or they weren't called festivals. It was just a dance event. So, by the time Summadayze started, we just became the place to be, I guess, in one of the places to be in the world. Of course, being in summer when it was European winter or English winter, they'd all like to come out here for summer. So that was a plus as well.
You mentioned it, and when you say Mark James, people think Summadayze straight away. It's one of the most iconic festivals that ran through Melbourne and sort of really opened the doors for a generation of dance fans that still to this day look back on it and probably are inspired by it. Can you run me through how Summadayze began and where the idea came from?
We were doing welcome parties at the Docklands. So it was, we'd do, anywhere between 10 and 20,000 New Year's Eve at the Docklands. And then I had this stupid idea of doing an outdoor day party on New Year's Day. Everyone said, "Oh, you're crazy. That's just ridiculous." For one, day parties don't work, because it was just not, it just wasn't done in those days. I said, no, look, I think I'll give it a shot. And then, like, what do you want to do? So Myer Music Bowl. And it was, it was no, I think the Myer Music Bowl was, they hadn't had a show on in years. It was just carols by candlelight, and that was it. It was nothing all year round. So, went to them and said, the Arts Centre, and said, listen, this is what we want to do. We want to start at 9 a.m. We've got 15, 20,000 people at the docks, 1998, going to 1999. They went, oh, okay. They didn't know what was going on. So here we are I'm standing it was a midday after we'd done the docks party, standing on the top of the hill with Jason, my ex-partner for Future, and the head of the Arts Centre, looking around, not a soul there. It was like 50 people at midday. Thinking to myself, and they're looking at me going, "Oh, you're an idiot," And an hour later, it was just hordes of people just came through the botanical gardens. So the first day we did about 8,000, I think, in 1998, and the next year it doubled, and the year after that it doubled again. So by the time we, finished it up in 2012, it was religiously doing 25,000 people a day and selling out within, 10 minutes sometimes, like breaking down the ticket companies' webs and all that sort of stuff. So it was pretty amazing,
Yeah, Yeah, and for me, like my earliest memories of being 18 years old was walking through that botanical garden and just that boom, 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 boom. Fuck, it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. And to me, the bowl means so much because of those first shows. And like you said earlier, no one called them raves. Like they were just parties. And it's funny now because I use the term when I'm explaining, like, when we used to run raves because kids understand it. But what I mean is parties. Like we used to just get speakers, some decks. We'd run parties anywhere.
Well, that was it. You didn't. We didn't start out to do it for the money and all that sort of stuff. It was like, we just wanted the party to continue and people to have fun, and that because the ticket price was like $60 or something like that when we first started doing the bowl. So, it was like just crazy sort of gung-ho days.
So had anyone done dance music stuff at the bowl prior to you?
No, not at all. It wasn't, it was sort of occasionally had some rock bands on and stuff like that. It was just sitting there collecting dust, to be honest.
What made you think of the bowl? Like, obviously now it's so iconic, but it's probably like in our scene because of those shows, and we've had now Daft Punk, Kiss My Grass, like the list goes on of massive shows that have been there. What made you think it could work? Like, and for me, the fact that it wasn't used before you used it, I can't even get my head around because it's made for it, I think.
Yeah, well, we had a good relationship with the authorities by doing the Docks parties. So we wanted to keep it in the central district area, and it was the only place that, had the size, had the fencing, had the state, already purpose-built basically, and we could do our own bars there back in those days. So that, we signed a long-term deal doing the bars, so that was a good thing. And it was just a great spot, and, it's just so many, kids used to like have meetings in Federation Square, and they'd the fence jumpers, they'd all get online and all meet in Federation Square and then, jump the fences and all that sort of thing. We have double fence lines. So it just sort of became an iconic thing for the Victorian government as well, I think. We were on the things to do if you're coming to Australia and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, it was just the right place at the right time.
So I've got something that someone told me, and I have to ask you the question, right? Yeah. So someone told me, obviously I know that New Year's Day was never a thing, but for most people still to this day, New Year's Day is bigger than New Year's Eve in Melbourne. Someone told me the reason why was because when you guys started doing when you first started doing Summadayze, the reason why New Year's Day worked better was because all the artists would play in Sydney, and then we would be the second tier to get their artists in New Year's Day. Not true.
Nah, not at all. Not at all. We used to do it all around the country. So we'd do a thing on the Gold Coast called Summer Field Days, and that was with Fuzzy, who did New Year's Day in Sydney. So they started sometime after we did. So we would fly artists in between on the same day, a Learjet or whatever like that, a jet. And then, next week we'd go to the Gold Coast. But it did wipe out New Year's Eve though. I mean, we were doing like 15, 20,000 people at Docks, and we slowly got, as Summadayze got bigger, New Year's Eve got smaller. So we completely wiped out everywhere on New Year's Eve.
And it was like that forever. Like when I was a promoter, it was like New Year's Eve was a no-go zone. And even after Summadayze, because the culture was New Year's Day in Melbourne, no one would go on New Year's Eve. And people would like see their fireworks and go straight to sleep. So
so we sort of wiped ourselves out at the same time, which was, and as I said, there was just no day parties or whatever. That was a no-no, Ooh, don't go out during the day. And all of a sudden that became the trend.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I want to dive back into Summadayze in a little bit, but firstly, I want to go back because the stuff you did prior to that, you were working in the club scene, you talk Pure, you were talking Express, but you did a whole bunch of other clubs, and I'd love to touch on some of those ones. Ones I know of, you talked about Mega Bar. I'd love to hear about like Mega Bar, the involvement and sort of what that looked like back then.
Oh, that was like the first sort of recovery in Melbourne. Day thing. We used to start, we originally started because we had Mansion, and Mansion was just always packed till 7 a.m. and people would be like still going hard. So we off to Mega Bar. So we started Mega Bar. So it was that used to just pump on all day long. So it was it was in the city. It had a 24-hour license, and the sound was in there. It was 2 levels. Yeah, it was just it was a big experience. Mega Bar had all sorts in there.
What time did you used to run?
We used to start at 7. Sometimes used to go right through till the next day, like a...
So you talk about Melbourne, right? And that was obviously the first recovery club. So you talk about Mega Bar being the first recovery bar in Melbourne. And for people for a long, long time, recoveries have been a huge part of the Melbourne nightlife culture. they went on to, there's only really Revolver now. There's not a lot of them getting around anymore. But prior to, like, after Megabar, there was, I know you said AM PM.
Yeah.
There was this, I think it was Subway or something like that. They started to pop up, and then it got to a point where people weren't going out in Melbourne until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. Sort of like the Summadayze New Year's Day thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the party didn't start until 5 o'clock in the morning. Why again do you think it blew up so big in Melbourne?
I think for that exact reason, people never used to go out till 1 o'clock in the morning. So it was, I don't know, people, I don't know, it was just the culture at the time. A lot of people worked in the industry who used to come on to Megabar as well. So they'd finish work wherever they were working at any club and come to Megabar on the Sunday because they'd finished for the weekend. So it became a very industry type thing as well. Lots of DJs, lots of promoters, lots of bar staff and all that sort of thing, like people from the casino, because that was down, around the corner. So it was became more of an industry type thing, the after party.
So in that period of time when you're running all these nightclubs, is there one that you loved the most? Mansion was great. I mean, QBH was great when we had Famous. That was just massively huge. And then we ended up doing it in Sidney at home on Saturdays as well. So look, they all have a special place. I mean, Pure was probably really that was sort of kickoff from to where I ended up basically. Yeah. So they're all great. So you're running shows in nightclub, and most nightclub promoters, they eventually either go by nightclubs or they move into the event festival space.
Yeah.
Your first big event or festival, what was it?
I think it was, which was the first event, was the place down on Lakeside Drive called
Carousel.
No, the big joint on the corner, the function joint, Lakeside Drive there. Anyway, we did a thing called biology there. So that was the first sort of rave, I guess, that we did. But and then obviously the Docks, it went from doing 2,000 people to 3,000 to all of a sudden doing 10,000. Sort of blew up overnight. So the Docks was probably one of the first big things.
And that were the New Year's Eve shows?
I did Gatecrasher there and Trade and God's Kitchen and all those type shows.
So with those brands, like they're massively global, iconic brands, how did you get those to come to Australia?
Just by contacting the people who owned them, going overseas and talking to the agents and, as you said in the early days, it was mostly fax machines. So I'd fly over there and have meetings with whoever I could, just put it out there, come to Australia, we'll do your brand, we'll look after it and all that sort of thing. So it was, it was a bit of a new territory, the Wild West for them. So yeah, they all went for it, which was good.
I mean, I can imagine being in London and hearing about this little town in the middle of nowhere, and then they come here and there's 10,000 people on the docks.
That's what it was like, and then word spread really quickly. So everyone wanted to come by the 2000s.
So myself, I'm obviously a 2000s sort of party guy, and I look back at the 90s very jealous, right? When you were in the 90s partying and you had all these warehouse raves on the docks, you had all these parties and events and recoveries and stuff, no doubt you would have saw some crazy stuff. Is there any crazy sort of stories that come to mind when you're running clubs or running festivals that you can share with us?
Look, most of the things are all, sort of behind the scenes, like having, the whole hotel book of DJs and, getting called up from the hotel at 3 a.m. in the morning. Oh, you better come down, Mark. It's getting a bit, your DJs are getting a bit, your crew are getting a bit ruckus. Going there and they've set up all the furniture in the because they have the whole floors, they'd set up all the furniture in the hallway of their rooms, at the front of their rooms and having a party there and getting the buckets and just going around to all the rooms and filling all the buckets of all the mini bars because they wouldn't serve them any more drinks, and you'd arrive there and the elevator opened, there'd be like a TV or a seat in the elevator. They'd send all the furniture down. So it was all just crazy stuff like that. And obviously fence jumpers where I went back to before and there's loads of stories.
I can imagine. Going back to the Summadayze stuff.
Yeah.
So 999 starts off or into the New Year's, the crosses over. blows up to do 25,000. I don't know if you hold the record still, but you definitely held the records of points of the most amount of people in that period or era of time. Some of the artists that you had were humongous. The first one, what was the lineup?
First one was all locals, just all locals, and me closing. So it was pretty much all locals because it was just something that we really didn't plan for. I only planned it a couple of months prior. So and then the second one was a handful of just a couple of DJs from the night before the welcome party, and then it just became obviously bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah.
When you started, did you expect it to get that big?
No, I never. That's the beauty of those days. You never sort of went, oh, we've got to do 10,000. We've got to do this. It was just like, we'll put it on, see how we go, and try and break even. It was always, let's just try and break even, see how we go.
So then Future Music becomes this sort of megalith, right?
Yeah, that was a monster.
When does Future Music come into play? Was it Future Music when you ran the first Summadayze, or was that down the track?
No, Future Music came in 2007. So we were doing a thing called Two Tribes for 2001 to 2006. And we'd sort of outgrown that, to be honest. And so we're doing the whole of Melbourne Park. We were doing Rod Laver. We were doing... we used to be Vodafone Arena and all the outdoor stages. So that was about 20,000 people, and it was sort of outgrowing that. So it was time to change. I always wanted to do our own brand, so it was Future Entertainment basically. So we moved to Future Music Festival. So that kicked off in 2007 and then I got out at about 2013. So that was, just majorly building up over the years and doing the whole country. It was a juggernaut, that thing.
So the Two Tribes thing, no doubt anyone who was raving in those periods went to Gatecrasher, went to all these parties we're talking about. It was a massive part of, again, our culture and scene. Can you run me through the story about how that all began?
What, Two Tribes?
Yeah.
Look, we did it with hardware. So Richie was working with us and doing a few things. He'd do some side stages and whatnot. And we just, we were doing some things down at the Docklands. So we just decided to just come together and call it Two Tribes and hardware and future. So that's how that started. But it sort of outgrew itself a little bit. We were going in a different direction. We were sort of putting on all the acts anyway. So it just moved into future. But, it was good in its time.
How many years did you do that for?
2001 to 2006, so 5 years.
Okay. Felt like longer, to be honest.
Yeah. A lot of people say that. But, so that it sort of outgrew itself, yeah.
So going to this future thing, this is the new part, and this is when future turns into this mammoth monster.
Yeah.
How does that begin? What's the thought process behind it? And again, run me through some of the people that played there.
Oh, Jesus. The thought process was take something nationally on a large scale, like, the Big Day Out formula, that sort of vibe. Have not only electronic artists, but bands as well. So, bands like New Order and Stone Roses and, Dizzy Rascal and Zelia Banks, all, Kesha and all sorts of bands we had on through the years.
Presets. As you're mentioning names, I'm literally remembering every of those festivals. Prodigy, Presets.
Yeah, Prodigy, Presets, Chemical Brothers. So we're the first to sort of bring out a lot of those acts. And, and we wanted to bring a variety of music to the country, basically, not just electronic, not just DJs, but, experience all different genres on different stages. So that was the plan. And it worked quite well for many years. Yeah.
Do you have a favourite future that you were involved in?
Ooh, I think 2010 was my favourite. That was just, we did 50,000 in Randwick and, 45,000 at Flemington and the numbers were just huge all around the country. It was just amazing. I mean, it's not about numbers, but it was just, to see that many people enjoying themselves in a safe environment, which we prided ourselves on running safe festivals, was great. It was good. People were just having a good time. The ticket prices weren't outrageous. The artist prices were, still reasonable. It was just everything fit.
So yeah, because you kind of wind back there, and I think you've sort of like had this natural progression over maybe like probably almost decades. But do you like reflect back on how insane what you actually did for Future and Summadayze is ever?
Yeah, look, I think the day we did, it was the year 2000 and everyone thought, all the power would go off, and we were actually doing a New Year's Eve, we were doing a live feed to Gatecrasher where you could go in a room and there's big screens and, the DJs would be playing at the same time and all that sort of thing. Anyway, that failed. That didn't work. But then the next day we did, obviously, Summadayze. So we had 20,000 people, 1999 at the docks, and then 25,000 people the next day at Summadayze. And we're sort of just standing there around midday thinking, up on the stage thinking, fuck, wow, this is finally sort of got there. This is just over the top. Year 2000, new millennium, you've just done this and that, and it's just, wow, you sort of stood back myself and went, that's incredible, Well, you never really had time to do that. You're always like, on to the next thing. You'd be up at 9 o'clock and you didn't get to bed till 3 or 4, working with agents. So you never really had time to sit back and look at things, It was always gung-ho.
And during that period of time, you were at the helm of that whole company. Like, what was that like, sort of being, the big man of this thing that was so fucking big?
It was good. I mean, we had, at one stage we had 150 people on the road, like if instead of, doing a whole booking of flights, we'd hire our own 747 because it would be cheaper to have all our artists and all our crew flying on our own plane. So, it was great. Very stressful. We had a great team. We had lots of, I think every man and his dog has worked for us along the lines, who's been brought up in the promoting genre. But it was very stressful. I mean, it got to a point when I got out, it was just, I'd had enough. I was so burnt out, but it was great.
That's the thing that people don't really talk about. Like when you talk about promoters, like you're kind of reinventing yourself all the time.
Yeah.
Music genres are changing. Nothing's ever the same. On top of that, you got gate crashes you talk about. There's insurance. There's people potentially maybe overdosing. I know it does happen at some festivals. You got all these fucking outlying factors that you got a business that things can happen overnight that can completely implode and ruin your business.
Like I used to wake up to the Herald Sun in the morning and be like front page dancing to death, and there'd be reporters out the front of your place because you've had a couple of overdoses. You have to jump the fence, the back fence, you get chased and constant phone calls. So there is, there's ups and there's downs as well. There's no doubt about that,
Well, especially when you were heroing dance music, right? At the time, there was an attack on dance music from the media.
Yeah.
How was that dealing with that? Like, knowing the electronic space, being so involved in it, but having these sort of, I guess what you'd call people that didn't understand it, just constantly attacking it. Because I remember like news reports of saying, Summadayze, this many dogs, this many catches. It was almost like they were out to kind of get it. Anyone that was involved in dance music back then, you looked at like a druggie.
Oh yeah, you looked at, enemy number one. We ended up, or Jason ended up writing the code of practice for health and safety for Victoria for festivals, which went Australian-wide. So it was, government approved. So it got to that stage where we had to show that we're actually running, and implementing the health and safety factors that everyone should be guidelined. We're not the ones that should be attacked. So, I think the authorities were always on our sides. It was the media just love, they just love the drama. So, kids in those days were a bit hectic as well. Like, I think now it's good that they're doing the pill testing, they're doing all that sort of thing. But nothing like that was ever thought of. That would be taboo in those days, But it was always going to be in the industry, and it always will. So it's you just got to make sure you manage it and look after it.
Is it strange from you being a part of it from the very beginning to now seeing how commercial it is? Like back then, it was an underground thing.
Yeah.
It was in warehouses. It was sort of under the rug. And when it did get big, the media was on it saying how bad it was. Now it's on every single mainstream radio.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You've got guys selling out Flemington Racecourse. Like, is it crazy for you to reflect on where it came from to where it is now?
Yeah, definitely. You wouldn't have thought, you wouldn't have thought in your wildest dreams back in the early 90s where it was going to go. But I always had it in the back of my mind that, I suppose it comes from DJing. You're playing a song and you see people just loving it on the dance floor. So that's just got to get bigger and bigger and bigger. That once it gets out of the underground, it becomes commercial, and it's and then it has its ups and downs. I guess music changes. So it was always there. It was always going to happen.
So you go from being a DJ to a festival boss, but as you said before, always were a DJ. What's your favorite gig that you played during that period of time?
Oh, geez. Played so many gigs. You know, I used to go play overseas a lot. I played quite a few festivals and whatnot. But it's always good to play your hometown. And, you know, I always remember back in the days of Chasers was one of my favourite, you know, Friday nights of Chasers. It was always just pushing new music and we had the sort of, you know, the freedom to do that. So I always looked that back in fond memories, I guess, because it was, you know, people never used to look at the DJ. It was, you were the last person. You're stuck behind a bloody mesh so people wouldn't throw stuff at you and your head down. Yeah, that was pretty much it. Yeah, play the song. You know, they throw shit at you. So, yeah. But, yeah, a lot of gigs. Like Pure was another one, obviously.
It's interesting. I always ask that question, right? And it's always when people were coming up in those sort of grungy rooms that are their favorite gig. Doesn't matter if they're playing festivals 50,000.
Yeah.
The number one response is this club at this point when things started to blow up. Like it seems to be this ongoing trend that I see. So to hear you say it too is kind of crazy because it's common that every single person says it.
Yeah, I think it's because you were always trying to, you know, push new music and make people dance to what you liked. You know, now it's all over the radio and anything. You can just put on a USB and go for it. But in those days, it was a struggle. It was a struggle to get people to dance. You know, I used to do the early, you know, Chasers on a Saturday night and, you know, everyone would just be sitting there and people would just wait until the first person got on the dance floor until anyone danced. You know, in those days, that's what they used to do. So, you know, you'd have to pick that person out and play the song to get the first couple on the dance floor. And, you know, it was like a job. It was great.
Yeah, good job.
It was a good job.
So you're doing these massive festivals with hundreds of thousands of people over a period of like a decade plus. There's good and there's bad. So can you run me through two things? One, firstly, what was the most challenging thing you've ever had to deal with when you were running these festivals? And then second, the best thing that you got from running festivals?
Challenging thing. I mean, you know, we go back to, you know, having fatalities at events is not too great. You know, you have an incident and, you know, it's always plays on your mind. It's a guilt factor. If I hadn't had run this festival, this wouldn't have happened. That was, you know, we had a fatality at Summadayze one time. So that was always a bit hard to handle. And obviously the workload was always full on those days. As I said, you'd be up at 9 in the office and then you wouldn't get to sleep until 3 or 4 in the morning because you'd be on email with agents and getting all that sorted. So, you know, and the countless stress and you had no social life. It was like, you know, it was just wipe the social life off. It was all work. That were the bad bits. The up bits was just, you know, seeing thousands of people having a great time. I mean, and then having, you know, being able to, you know, look after people in the company and everyone's done a great job and opening door. We used to open a lot of doors for people, you know. We'd take on a lot of promoters, DJs, you know, kids that no one had ever heard before. It's all right. We'd put you on a stage, you know, the new guns, the young guns stage and all that. So it was sort of gratifying in that to watch people evolve with what we're doing.
When you talk about these giant festival promoters, I'm not saying all from Melbourne, but majority are. Like majority of the pioneers were. Why do you think that is?
Oh, yeah, look, something in the water. I don't know. It's you know, I think they've grown up with it. Their brothers grew up with it. Their cousins. Melbourne has always been a nightclub city and always been a number one entertainment city in Australia. I think it always has been. I mean, Sydney, you know, could say it is, but Melbourne's always been about nightclubs, going out and music, basically. So people have grown up with it, as I said, with their cousins, their brothers, their parents now, you know. So they've just been brought up with it.
Because of that, there's always been a lot of competition in Melbourne, and it's very, very dire. Like it's always guys sort of going at one another's necks and whatnot.
Oh yeah. You know, we used to call it the postal wars. You know? but now it's like the internet. You know, it's like the social media.
I still do call it. I call it the Shark Tank. I'm like, everyone's in it, just trying to like bite each other.
Oh yeah. It's the smiling assassins. Don't worry. Yeah, don't turn your back on a promoter.
So that period of time, you have all these massive festivals, and then they all kind of collapse, like around the same time. At that time, everyone was like, "Is this the death of festivals?" Crazily enough, it's happening again right now. I'd love to know why you think that festivals back in those days collapsed, and then I'd love to know what you think about why it's happening again.
Pretty much both the same thing. I think it's just the costs, the artist costs, the insurance costs, the setup costs, versus a ticket price when people just can't afford it. You know, it got to the point, and plus too much on. You know, it was just got to the point where we were doing large shows, and other companies doing large shows, and then you get these fly-by-nighters who think they can do it, and then all of a sudden these festivals are popping up everywhere, and people just don't. They plan. They've only got so much money. They plan for that weekend. So it was, it was just too much for small population. Like you look at overseas, they've got millions and billions of people, but we've only got a small population when you look at the nuts and bolts of it, and the costs. The artist costs just went through the roof. Just ridiculous. Not due to the artists. Due to the management and their agents and all that, they all just jumped in on the bandwagon. It's at stages. Future music festivals over 30,000 people just to break even.
Fuck, really? Fuck me. Was that Australia wide or just per city?
Australia wide. So per city.
30,000 per city to break even.
Yeah. So we do 50,000 in Sydney and we do 40,000 or so in Melbourne. But, we do 28 or 30, 25,000 people in Adelaide. And, so, you're always struggling. That's why I think that was a big thing as well. I think we shouldn't have gone, done the whole country all the time. It was like, if I had my time again, I'd probably just do Melbourne and Sydney, or an East Coast run. So, sometimes you do 20,000 in Brisbane, you got a 30,000 people break even. So it was always, it looked great in Melbourne and Sydney, but you were dropping millions in other places.
I guess though sometimes you would have had to do these extra shows because
the artists want the
you were doing 5-show deals, right?
And plus, not only they wanted to do the festivals, they wanted to do side shows like Prodigy or something could do 5 arena shows as well. So New Order and bands like that, they'd always want to do side shows. So it was real catch-22, So.
That's actually insane. 30,000 break even is blowing my mind. Yeah. That's something that people don't know, right? And that's what I love to kind of like show on my pods is that people, I kind of knew, I didn't think it was that high, but it's like, I always say the promoters, they're not really great businessmen, they're insane. Yeah. Because I'm like, when you do the figures and you actually know what it's going, like most festivals, you go to a festival with 10,000 for argument's sake, and you think they're killing it, and they're probably 5,000 under, and they've lost $1 million. Yeah, like
100%. Like Michael Gudinski, late great Michael Gudinski came up to me. We'd just done Global Gathering. I think we'd lost, over $2 million. And I was at the ARIA Awards. He come tap me on the back, turn around, he goes, "Welcome to the club, mate." And I've gone, what do you mean? He goes, "Well, you're not a real promoter until you lost a couple of million." And I'm like, oh God, that's not a club I want to be in. It's like,
But in saying that, it's part of the parcel.
It's true, you aren't.
If you love money, you shouldn't be a promoter.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, like, oh God, what a club.
So another one I always have thought, if I got the chance to ask you, and I'm going to ask you, is when you guys first started, you guys were trailblazers realistically when it came to electronic dance music. There was not really like a roadmap to run these type of festivals.
It's Wild West.
Yeah, and then you guys went on to do this, you built teams and stuff, but it's like, how did you do that? Like, how did you guys go, okay, cool, we're going to do these stages, we're going to do X, Y, Z. It's not really been done before. Like, what inspired / also kind of, how did you kind of figure out how to build these transport teams, how to get jets, These things were like, for people that don't understand, you were doing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people per year at festivals. Yeah. To build a company and team when no one else has done it, you're following a roadmap in Australia is a very large feat. Like, how did you actually navigate that?
Very organically, basically. Jason, my partner, was always very good at that sort of stuff. I was great at the entertainment side of, the media and putting all the art together and booking all the DJs and all that. And Jason was very good at dealing with police and councils and getting the show on the road and that sort of thing. So, and it sort of built organically from, because we had a bit of experience with Summadayze used to go around the country as well. Or used to do, Perth. You did run the country. So on a smaller scale, when I say small, it's still 20,000 people shows and 40,000 in the Gold Coast, we sort of learnt by mistakes, you know. You learn by mistakes, especially when you're going into a gig in Brisbane, it's been raining 7 nights before and there's water like that, you know, and you have to get 2 tons of wood chips in, 7 tons of wood chips to, you know, before you can load in. So you learn by mistakes. Your stage is blowing over and if the wind's the wrong way. And so it's all trial and error. But, you know, you always seem to manage to get the show on the day up and running. So
it's weird when you reflect on it, isn't it? Because you do these things and all these crazy things happen. It's like, you know, I've had generators go out. I've had the same sort of stuff where something blows away.
Yeah.
And in the time, you just sort of deal with it. You move on.
Yeah.
And then the show always does go on.
The show always does go on. I mean, you know, we've had, as I said, like the night before, a whole stage just collapsed due to wind, you know.
Where was that?
Cyclone. That was in, I think it was in Flemington. We had a freak weather occurrence. It hadn't happened in like 50 years or something. It just happened to happen on our stage, you know. So and the next day, and it just rained or was raining on and off all day the next day. And I remember that so well. It was like, you know, we had to stop the show because we just got torrential. It was like sideways rain. Jason said, "Go out, here's the microphone, go out," because I always used to MC back in the days. So, yeah, no, I just grabbed the microphone out on the stage. "Okay, folks, we're going to have to stop the show." So, cans flying at me, shoes, and people, "Boo, get up, Marquez, we hate you." But, okay, we've got to stop the show. And be like, oh, it's like.
That wasn't Prodigy one, was it?
Yeah, no, it was a Prodigy one, no.
No, because there was one where I
think it was a Dead Mouse one. Could have been.
Probably even worse.
Yeah.
There was a show that I remember, I was actually doing a side stage for you guys, and it was Prodigy were about to play, and we all kind of went there. It was like, you know, 30, 40,000 people, and this fucking giant storm rolled in, and it was like, and everyone was just drenched, and even me, and I'm like a diehard, I couldn't stay. Like, I had to leave.
Oh, I know. We used to have the worst luck with weather, I tell you what. But, you know, then we had some good times as well with weather, but Summadayze was just all over. One year it'd be 40 degrees, the next year people would be just drenched. I used to make a fortune on those
Ponchos.
Ponchos. We were the first ones to do ponchos, branded ponchos. And then I think after that we thought, well, we better do merch every year. So we had T-shirts and visors and all sorts of stuff. So it all started from, you know, ponchos.
So other than the cyclone ones, was that like the worst weather you ever had at a festival or had to deal with at a festival?
Yeah, pretty much. Oh, Brisbane was always wet. But yeah, it's probably the worst, yeah.
So talk about future, and again, back in my generation, you guys went on to run Famous at QBH, which was a massive nightclub. Which was a massive night for people in that era. What made you guys go from these giant festivals back into nightclubs? What made you dip your toe back in?
We were doing some stuff with ALH Group anyway, like running 21st Century, and we had a division of Future called Future Clubs, which Alistair Kennedy ran, and so we were doing all sorts of different corporate things, and we were doing like the stage at the Grand Prix, called Sidetracked. We were doing that, and we had a sponsorship company based in Sydney at that time. We're doing all bits and pieces everywhere. So the ALH group said to us, "Look, we're thinking about, you know, redoing QBH. Do you want to take it over and do it for us?" So we're like, "Yeah, fine." So, you know, they spent millions on doing that, and just sort of that just took off like crazy. It was like 3,000 people inside, 3,000 people outside trying to get in. They were closing off the street, the casino. Basically, the police would have to close off the street with people spilling out onto the road. It just was mayhem. It just got out of control.
And again, did you expect that, or was it because of that?
I didn't expect. Well, I expected 1,500 people a night, and because we had a good database in those days, and we had all the DJs and Adam and all those guys, and we had a great DJ lineup, and all the mechanics were there to do it. So, but didn't expect it. It was just too crazy. It stopped the whole city.
And it ended up ending because there was a couple of incidents outside.
Yeah, there was never anything inside. It was just like people who crazies that wouldn't be allowed in. Like one kid got hit by a car, another one got, it was all stuff that happened outside. And I think the ALH group were big company that just was too much drama, which is fair enough.
Well, at that period of time, I don't know if you remember, but they had that war on the streets, and they were like, there was reporters all down King Street around that area, and they were looking for incidents. And I remember working,
100%.
And I remember working during that period, and I was like, it's no worse than it ever has been. But they were flicking, they were putting people with blood on their face, and it was effectively like a media barrage of attention that they were out there to make sure that these nightclubs were getting the attention to sell papers, no doubt. But at the same time, it closed a lot of clubs during that period of time.
It did, 100%. It was like, war on nightclubs there for a while. But it was something we had to deal with, which it was sort of good. I don't know. Around that stage, it was just, we were doing too much, and we were doing Famous in Sydney at the same time. At home was doing 2,000 people. So, it was, I think we just took on too much. And it sort of happened for a reason, that sort of falling over.
You've worked with some of the biggest artists in the world. You've got to have a favourite artist that you've worked with.
Look, going back, because I still go back to the early days, like John Digweed was always one of my good friends and good artists. I mean, Armin van Buuren was always great. We did many years with him. Chesto was always amazing. They're very good artists and very good people too. That's like, you'll find a lot of DJs these days, it's all about money. They might go, oh, yes, and they play their hand, oh, we love you and all that, but it's, they want to make money. These guys are sort of the backbone of the industry who, did it for the right reasons. So I always respected DJs who were like that. A lot of American DJs, Roger Sanchez's and stuff like that. I've got, so many friends and DJs, it's hard to sort of, pinpoint who.
So then on the other spectrum of it, no doubt.
The assholes.
I don't expect you to name any names, but sure you've got some artist disasters that you can tell me about.
Yeah, tell me about it. I mean, artists not wanting to go on stage unless they got their balance in cash in 24 hours and stuff like that, they'd say, I've got my agent on the phone and, I've told him that I want the cash, take home cash. And so it just doesn't work that way. But, wanting their own Learjet, their own jet to fly, to the next state, which is like an hour away, It's all bizarre things like that. Riders are just ridiculous, including, a bag of nuts and, hookers and all that sort of stuff. Just ridiculous riders and not even using them. It's just, the list goes on.
There's a good part there where you said the hooker thing, right? Because I guess it's not talked about, but when people think riders, right, they think blue M&Ms, take out the other ones and rah. But the reality of it is it's a lot darker than that. The riders that I saw, I remember having artists asking for drugs and they were saying, if we don't get them.
A bag of nuts.
Yeah. And they said, if we don't get these before, we're not going to
go on.
We're not going to perform.
No, we're not going to go on.
So what were some of the things you used to see that were like, off the record in riders?
Oh, flowers in room full of flowers and stuff like that. Cristal, many bottles of Cristal, which is, I don't know how much a bottle of that is, $1,000 or something like that. But just, just crazy riders, But thankfully, a lot of the acts we did tour over time were really good. You sort of get to know the bad ones along the way. You can see it coming.
Yeah.
So you sort of stay away. But we had a lot of big acts. It sort of got a little bit too commercial. Towards the end there, it was like, I remember we had a booking team. We had quite a few people booking, and one day, one of the guys comes to me and says, "Oh, I think we're going to book, what's a gangbang style guy." And I've just gone, "Oh my God, what's this come to?" And I didn't even know who he was. I was going, "Who? I've never even heard of him." They said, "Look, it's the biggest thing on the internet." Like, I'm looking at it going, oh, my God, what's my business come to? They go, no, don't worry, we'll probably pull in an extra 2,000 Asians and all this. And I'm like, oh, okay, if we have to. And
you go from warehouse raves on the docks to
gangbang style. Guy jumping around like a chicken. Anyway, didn't pull any more people. I'm like, all right, you guys are fucking brilliant. You're sacked. But I just remember flying. It was early in the morning, flying to Perth, and I'd never met him. It was like the third show or something, and I'm sitting across a business class, and we're the only two in business class. He's sitting over there. Looked over and go, oh God, that's him. And sort of tapped him and said, "Hi, I'm Mark James, the director of Future." And he just said, "Good for you." Theodore goes to sleep. I'm thinking, yeah, fucking, that says it all, doesn't it?
So you leave Future and you sell to Mushroom Group.
Yeah.
What makes you leave Future and how does that all transpire?
Oh, look, the bubble was about to burst anyway. I saw it in the writing. And look, I was totally burnt out. I was, that's 35 years of going full bore and, I wasn't married yet. I wanted to sort of, settle down because it just took up the whole of my social life, the business, I guess. I think generally just burnt out and I had some bad health problems with my ears. Tinnitus was just, I'd be taking drugs to get to sleep and taking drugs to get up, because I couldn't sleep. It was that bad and burst eardrums and all sorts of things. So it was the right time, It was the right time to get out for me. And, the years to follow, I think, was sort of dire straits for festivals.
Yeah, you literally got out at the right time. So Mushroom, we talked about this earlier off camera, but I'm going to bring it up.
Yeah.
So Mushroom still own the name Future and Summadayze.
Yeah.
And they're just sitting there in a vault, ready to go if they ever got pulled back out. There's going to be a lot of people at home that are going to find that interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's who knows what's to come in the future. But look, I don't think it's the right time for that scale of festival just yet. It's the market space isn't right. The economy isn't right. What's going on in the world? I know everyone says, blame it on something, but it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right to me. I think you'd be crazy to go into a multi-stage national festival right at this time or within the next 2 years. I reckon another 2 years, I reckon could be ripe, another 2 years.
What makes you think that things might come back?
What goes around comes around. And like the bubble, once the bubble does burst, but it always gets back there. So, it will never come back to what it was, that sort of volume, that sort of multi-stage, multi-genre. I don't think that will ever happen again in a long time, if it will ever happen. So, but I think smaller and more sensible versions will eventually, come to grips.
Yeah, that's super cool. You leave Future and then you go to Thailand from memory. Like I could be wrong here. So what is life like for post-Future for Mutt James?
Oh God. I thought I'd retire. I thought I'd retire and go to Thailand and, and live the dream. But, you end up sitting in Koh Samui in a big house on a mountain, just twiddling your thumbs, going from one extreme to another. So I stayed there for quite a few years and then personal reasons and whatnot came back about 5 years later and came back to the Gold Coast. I think I did, yeah.
Cowboy country. Yeah. And then I was there for personal reasons as well and now it's just good to be back in Melbourne. Back in the home city.
Back in the home city, got a few things up and running, just finished a new album. I've got a new album out, I should say. It took me a year to do it. So that's the music's, I came back to Australia with some sort of personal problems and whatnot. So, what am I going to do when I got back here? So I just sort of locked myself away and started writing music. And it's the old story. It's like, music saved my life. Got me sort of out of the doldrums again. So, basically, it was really good to get back to write some music.
And so going, like we talk about this crazy life, right? When it comes to crazy lives and crazy sort of promoter lives, yours is up there with fucking one of the craziest stories in Australia. Then going to twiddling your thumbs, like this perfect world. And I know myself, I fantasize about having a farm and not doing anything. I want to know from someone who thinks that I'm going to love that. When you did stop and do nothing, when you've gone from this crazy, as you said, you're always on the go, you got no time for anything else, then to silence, what was that like?
It was terrible. You end up finding other ways to try and, amuse yourself basically. So, you tend to drink, you turn to this, you turn to that because you got nothing else to do basically. So it really... it's a big shake-up. I don't think you can actually do that. It's not recommended, wind down instead of shut off.
And there's a thing, right? So the dopamine. So festival promoters, we both have done them. Like, I'm more of a nightclub promoter too myself, but I've done festivals. The dopamine hit from a full room, going off to any genre, it's something you can't explain. Like we both know it, but if someone hasn't done it before, if you run a show and that's happening, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it, but it's like, there's nothing quite like it, right?
Nothing like it, yeah.
So to then go to somewhere where you don't get that anymore, I can't imagine how challenging that would be. I honestly
it
can't.
was very challenging. Well, it sort of destroyed my whole sort of family, situation and everything. Basically, was just the wrong move to do.
What's that word? Idle hands is like a saying. I can't remember what the saying is, but like I think that's what he's just said before. You're not supposed to do it. But
you're not supposed to do it. Yeah. It's not recommended, kids. Yeah. But it's part of life, and I'm sort of it happened for a reason. I came back a different person, and totally, teetotal and all sorts of things. So, came back a different person. Came back a lot healthier, to what I was. I don't think I left the festival scene, but I didn't get out of the things that followed you, the rock and roll that followed you, just kept going.
Yeah.
So when I was supposed to stop,
Looking back on that rock and roll lifestyle, as you call it, because that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Do you reflect on it?
Fondly.
Fondly. That's exactly what I'm looking for.
Look, it's a love-hate relationship, isn't it? I wish I could go back and change a lot of things, and then again, I wish it's probably what was meant to happen. But I think we invented the "go hard or go home" saying, which was a bad saying. So that was our motto: is you open a mega bar and just keep going. But it can become very damaging to your health and your social life. But I wouldn't change it for a thing. It's all good.
Full circle into the music stuff. You just said, I know you just talked about how you started an album. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I started writing an album. Like I started the label when I got back in 2019. Started writing music again, and took it to a friend of mine called Ashley Gay, who has Zealon Digital, which is a distribution company. Said, "Oh, this is great. You should just start your own label." So we started Two Tribes Records, and with Pee Wee Ferris, who's a good friend of mine, a DJ, and
another icon.
Yeah, another icon. Yeah, great guy, genius, absolute genius. And then started the label. I've had quite a few releases, and then started writing the album a year and a half ago, and came out 2 weeks ago. An album called Love Triangle, which is very different to what people have expected. It's more of a soul, amapiano groove. Put it in the car, just drive, and it's a little bit of older generation, I think, but I'm pretty happy with it. It's going really well.
Where can people find it if they're looking for it?
Everywhere, on all good music platforms: Spotify, iTunes, preferably iTunes, Apple Music, everywhere.
So when you're not writing music now, what are you doing? What's Mark James up to?
Dipping my toe back in. We've got a show called Tribes Festival coming up in November on Cup Eve at the Pavilion, which is a little bit of a tribute to Two Tribes. Some old DJ friends of mine, Ferry Corsten, Marcus Schulz, and a new DJ called Estiva. And then we've got a tribute room with Sandy Van, Sergeant Slick, Jason Midrow, and all Amit Astaver, all the old trance crew, and a Young Guns room with all the new up-and-coming DJs. So that's on Cup Eve at Melbourne Pavilion.
So you have been doing shows in the last sort of 2-3 years here and there.
Yeah, we did Tiesto. I toured Tiesto about a year ago. What else? What else have I done? That was probably the major thing, yeah.
Coming back on a full cycle, retiring, and then coming back into dance again.
Right. You never get it. It's like, the mafia. Once you're in, you're in. You never get out.
It's so true. I retired in 2020 and I'm fucking back in full time.
No, you never get out. You never get out, son.
But going back to it now, doing it again, do you still get that same high that you did as a kid when you first started it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm probably a little bit slower in the reaction, but, it's just fun getting back in the game and talking to agents again overseas, and they're like, "Oh, where have you been? Thank God you're back." It's like, of course they say that. There's pays more money, but it's just good. It's good at getting the vibe back again. Look, I'm not. People just say to me, "Why don't you do some stuff for the older crowd and whatnot?" And I thought, well, I would with the Tribes Festival, but I want to. It's sort of the past meets the future type thing. So a bit of old and new. So that's, it's just been good to dip the toe back in. But I'm more about doing the music at the moment. I'm really enjoying that, to be honest.
Which I love. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Mark, that's where we come to an end.
Thanks, mate.
I want to say to you, thank you so much for giving me an hour of your time. But I also want to say thank you so much for being a pioneer of the scene that I got to call home, you got to call home, and all these other people have special stories. Without guys like you starting this and taking these risks, we don't ever get a fucking go at this. And these people who now, like a domino, have continued to go around and travel the world and represent Australia. And we're a little tiny country with a lot of power around the world. And it's because of guys like you taking a chance. So I want to say thank you so much for everything you've done for our industry, our scene, and everybody here in Melbourne.
Thanks, mate. I just want to say thank you to you too. I've been watching all what you've been doing, and it's really great for someone to go back and show people what it was like. And, you know, it's just really good at what you do, and it's a credit to you.
I appreciate it. I really do. Especially coming from yourself.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you, Mark.
See ya.